Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Facing pressure within his own caucus to step down, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau discusses his own leadership. A new report says the Israel Defense Forces discovered a rocket factory in Rafah and destroyed hundreds of rockets that were going to be used against the Jewish state. And Lethbridge saw 7 new firefighter recruits graduate today, ready to serve our community. BCN's Heidi Echevarria has the story.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will not say if he will convene a meeting of the Liberal Party's National Caucus to discuss the fallout from the party's historic by-election loss in Toronto last week. Some Liberals have privately demanded a meeting to discuss his leadership, while others want Trudeau to shuffle his cabinet. Trudeau says he met with his caucus executive and has had direct and frank conversations with some of his MPs.
Let's be very clear. Last week's by-election loss, not to sugarcoat it, was challenging. It was something we need to take seriously, and we've been engaged in lots of important conversations. I've had lots of calls with different members of caucus from across the country, not just in the GTA, to talk about how we make sure we're continuing our work connecting with Canadians, to make sure we're continuing to deliver for people. There are, as always, a range of perspectives and voices within the Liberal Party, and listening to all those voices and giving them all time to engage is really, really important. And that's what we've been doing, and what I'm going to continue to do while we stay focused on delivering for Canadians.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also mentioned that he will not be attending the Calgary Stampede this year. Now, the Conservatives say their win in Toronto St. Paul's proves that Canadians are simply tired of Trudeau and want a federal election right now. You know, in the face of a court order to disperse, pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Toronto are now taking down the tents and tarps they set up back in May. They're vowing, however, to continue with their campus activism. Demonstrators are planning to hold a rally just prior to leaving King's College Circle.
I'm quite shocked, and I think we're still processing what this really means. We still need to consult with community and campers who have been here for 62 days to decide what the next steps are going to look like. We do like to move in a way that's consensus-based. Everybody's, had their bodies on the line here for 62 days, 62 plus days now, and we will continue showing up on campus. We will continue applying pressure in a variety of ways, and it's important to make clear that this encampment is one of many tactics, and that, Israeli Apartheid Week started on this campus 18 years ago. And it is for the first time in history that U of T is negotiating on the topic of Palestine, even uttering the word Palestine. And so we have been able to achieve historic, development and movement on this item, and we will continue applying pressure.
Toronto police officers posted a court order on the encampment fence on Wednesday morning as Palestinian flags waved overhead. So many Palestinian families have been displaced in Gaza since the war between Israel and Hamas escalated last year, following the deadly attack by the terrorist group, which left more than 1,200 people dead. Many Palestinians from Gaza's Khan Yunis are struggling to survive.
بالمرة ولا مأوى الواحد يعيش فيها الإنسان بالمرة الموت لسه أهون من هالعيش اللي احنا عايشين شنشط على المي شنشطة على الأكل شنشطة على كله توليع نار وحطب وميل ودور وقعد دور في الشيء ما بتلاقيش أي شيء يساعدك في الحياة. احنا بنمشي في الحياة مش راضية تمشي معنا.
There are reports that the Israel Defense Forces has destroyed hundreds of rockets that were part of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket factory in Rafah. According to TBN Israel's correspondent Yair Pinto, this is a big win for Israel in its fight against terror.
Let's start a report in Rafah, where IDF Special Forces units under the direction of the intelligence wing raided an outpost and an underground production site of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organization that is affiliated directly to Iran in the area of the Tel El Sultan neighborhood in Rafah. This is the largest underground site for the production of long-range rockets in the Gaza Strip. It includes highly sophisticated machine tools and equipment that will be very difficult to replace. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organization has produced hundreds of rockets at this site over the past few years, but they won't be producing any more rockets there.
Despite hardships brought on by war, Flowers still fill cities across Ukraine. Deep purple petunias and yellow rock roses are bursting out of planters that line Kyiv's back roads and boulevards.
Українці на протязі свого життя в своїх традиціях завжди мають поєднання якихось ритуалів та квітів. І ми це бачимо і при народженні дитини, коли її скуповують в якихось відварах, і весільні вінки, квіти, якісь релігійні традиції. Завжди всюди вплітаються квіти в їхнє життя, і багато пісень і звичаїв, вони нерозривно поєднані з квітами. Мабуть, тому що це емоційний зв'язок і зв'язок зі своєю землею.
Багато чоловіків на війні, але є такі моменти, коли чоловіки купляють своїм дружинам, онлайн, можна так сказати, посилають своїх друзів і передають букети. Або замовляють, у нас і доставки тут працюють, замовляють своїм дружинам квіти, ми доставляємо.
Hurricane Beryl roared through open waters as a powerful Category 4 storm that headed towards Jamaica, making landfall in the southeastern Caribbean. Emergency officials say so far, at least 6 people have died from the storm. Officials in St. Vincent and the Grenadines also say at least 90% of the homes in the region have been damaged.
You know, like a movie where you just have a lot of devastation. That is how you don't like it. It's in a mess. It's in a mess. It's hard to think about it. It's hard to see it. And I don't think my enemies anymore. I mean, I don't even want my enemies to go through such a devastation. It's really tough.
Federal Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson was in Calgary with a funding announcement on Wednesday. Wilkinson says $11.8 million will be going towards supporting 8 hydrogen projects in Alberta, along with 2 small modular reactors. He says this will allow our province to work towards a low-carbon future as this government continues its focus on climate change.
We must acknowledge the reality, the scientific reality of climate change, and focus on those opportunities that will come through this transition. I would also caution folks to be careful about relying on folks who tell you that we can simply rely on technology. As a former cleantech CEO, I can say pretty confidently that while technology is clearly very important, technology on its own will not drive billions of dollars in new investments and bring new opportunities to countless communities. Technology on its own will not allow us to successfully address the challenge of climate change. To do this, we have to put in place the conditions that will enable technology development, that will enable demonstrations of technology, and ultimately that will enable commercial deployment.
The Alberta government announced new funding for testing methane emissions reduction technologies. Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz says $15 million will be spent over the next 5 years to test new technologies, reduce emissions, and create jobs. Officials say the funding will help more Alberta companies test technologies free of charge in both lab and live settings, attract more investment to get technologies to market that much faster.
This $15 million investment brings our total commitment to more than $72 million for methane reduction programs and technologies in recent years. But our dedication goes beyond dollars. We have reviewed more than 15,000 sites and facilities, generating over 16 million tons of emissions reductions. And again, we're proving that you can have it all. You can have strong economic growth. You can have rising energy production to meet global demand for safe, affordable, reliable, secure energy, and of course, commit to a lower emissions future.
Government officials say so far more than 70 companies have already tested projects through this program, helping advance clean technologies being used here in Alberta and around the world. Governments from both Alberta and the Northwest Territories have signed an agreement on economic corridors projects to support development and growth in both regions. Alberta Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors, Devin Tereshan, says this memorandum of understanding will help provide critical links to markets in and out of Alberta to stimulate the economy and create jobs. He says this agreement will allow for more opportunities to move our products around Canada and the world. Legal Aid Alberta says it is ending its services next Tuesday over a contract dispute with the province. The society says government officials gave it an ultimatum on a new funding arrangement that would undermine its independence. It says the government's move came suddenly after months of negotiations. The province says it is committed to funding legal aid, but must also spend tax dollars carefully. There are many differing opinions on how things should be run here in Alberta. Now, one conservative grassroots organization called the 1905 Committee has some policy ideas that are picking up steam right now. Nadine Wellwood, co-founder of the 1905 Committee, shares one idea on leadership accountability, which would see a Conservative Premier undergo a leadership review 2 years after being elected.
Politicians honestly believe that they are held accountable once every 4 years at the polls. And the greatest amount of influence I think we as individuals have are at the AGMs and at the political party level. And so I think if we can, as a grassroots movement, we're supposed to be a grassroots organization, can push a policy like this, it holds politicians to account. The worst thing I think that can happen with a politician is they get too comfortable. And I think being a little uncomfortable and knowing there are people watching and now they are accountable for what they say and have to follow that through with appropriate action is the best way to return politics to a more grassroots, honest, open, transparent way of working.
Make sure you catch my full interview with Nadine Wellwood, co-founder of the grassroots group, the 1905 Committee, coming up in the second half of our program. Most indoor pools reopened in Calgary today. The move came as water restrictions tied to a water main break are slowly being lifted. Swimming lessons also resumed. All restrictions on indoor water use have ended. A mandatory ban on outdoor water use, however, such as lawn watering, remains in place. Lethbridge Fire Emergency Services has a new group of firefighters to serve the Lethbridge community when an emergency arises. With a graduation ceremony, officials, family, and friends welcomed the 7 new recruits. BCN's Heidi Echevarria has that story.
That's right, Hal. With a special graduation ceremony, a group of 5 men and 2 women were inducted into the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services. This step was achieved after hard training that lasted months and in which they managed to demonstrate their capacity and skills to work as a single body to rescue and save lives. Sean Larkin says how was his experience as recruit training officer.
Like kind of your kids graduating from high school, so it's an exciting day for sure. They showed up early every single day. They worked extremely hard. They did come in as a group of individuals. They really bound together and found a way to get through everything I threw at them, and I threw a ton of stuff at them. So they handled everything with pride and with professionalism. The need is huge. We're continually growing. We're continually trying to get better. And a group like this that's highly motivated and dedicated to learning and growing and becoming professional firefighters is absolutely necessary, right? With the way we're growing and the things that we're doing, the way we lead by not just in fire but in EMS as well, we really take pride in the fact that we're on the forefront. We're changing the way other services in the province respond to emergencies because we take it very seriously.
Give your best effort and serve the community with love and professionalism were the words that were heard the most during the ceremony.
Working hard. It means pushing yourself every single day to do your best and to be your best, and constantly training and trying to get better. Because you can only ever go up. You can only learn more, train harder. So
these firefighters are now ready to give their all in the field and even face fire. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
The Lethbridge Farmers Market returned to the downtown core. Vendors were excited about heading outdoors once again for the summer months. This is the 3rd year that the market has partnered with the Downtown Lethbridge BRZ. It's an event many look forward to each and every year.
It is very significant for us as it's our only event throughout the year where we get to get off of our campus and out into the community. And giving back to the community is really at the core of what Lethbridge and District Exhibition is all about. So to have this event in downtown, to partner with a great group like the Business Revitalization Zone, gives us the opportunity to get out into the community, to serve a different audience, and to give people downtown the opportunity to have that weekly chance to shop local and support local vendors. So it's an event that we look forward to every year.
I love the diversity of people that I see and just the different types of people. And yeah, everybody is so wonderful and kind, and it's fun to visit and get to know people.
The Outdoor Farmers Market at Festival Square runs every Wednesday from 9 till 2. The Southern Alberta Summer Games kicked off today, and the event featured the opening of a brand new recreation facility in the town of Coaldale. BCN's Landon Hickok has the details.
The town of Coaldale is celebrating the grand opening of a massive recreation center in town. Wednesday saw a ribbon-cutting ceremony to officially welcome all visitors to its facilities. The opening comes at the same day where the town is hosting the opening ceremonies of the Southern Alberta Summer Games at the Rec Center later that day.
We have just under 1,800 athletes, along with their coaches, their families. So that'll bring several thousand people into Coaldale and the region. And the economic spin-off will be great for our businesses in the town of Coaldale and city of Lethbridge and other communities as well.
The Rec Center consists of many available activities, including playing fields for soccer, basketball, volleyball, and other sports, a squash court, a fitness center and track, and a large indoor playground for children. The Rec Center was built alongside a secondary school at the north side of the property, and the mayor says this will bring a huge boost to the community.
This has been a long time coming. I was on my first term on council. When council at the time, we voted to put $1 million away for a future recreation facility. And now we fast forward almost 8 years, and here we are today with the opening of the new facility.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
All public schools in the state of Oklahoma will now be required to add the Bible and 10 Commandments into their curriculum for grades 5 through 10. Officials say it will be primarily for historical context. Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters says there's a lack of understanding about the country's history and the influence the Bible has had since the birth of the United States, which he blames on the radical left. He says under his directive, instructors in every classroom across the state would have a copy of the Bible to teach them. Walters says leaders during the civil rights movement, including Martin Luther King Jr., made references from the Bible, and he wants educators to do the same. Now, the state of Louisiana signed a similar bill into law recently. It requires that the 10 Commandments be displayed in every classroom by next year. You know, times of disappointment, grief, and loss are facts of life, but that doesn't make it any easier. Figuring out a way to move forward in life can sometimes be very difficult. Chuck and Ashley Elliott, co-authors of the book, I Used to Be, How to Navigate Large and Small Losses in Life and Find the Path Forward, share how your perspective during grief can become skewed.
One of the biggest ones is grief lies and tells us that we're alone, that you're alone, that nobody's felt this before, even that you deserve this, that you've done something wrong because you should be punished. And that's why you're losing the person, the situation, the job, the relationship that you had. That's one of the big ones. It also tells us that nobody could understand, that there's no way that anybody could understand. Nobody wants to hear my pain.
Make sure you catch the full interview with co-authors Chuck and Ashley Elliott and BCN's Naveen Day coming up later in our broadcast. Well, we experienced more light showers today across much of southwestern Alberta, but the moisture should be leaving us fairly soon. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. It was another cloudy and rainy day here in Lethbridge today. There's a chance of more moisture developing tonight with a low near 10 degrees. Thursday, it should be clear and clear up quite a bit, and we should see a high near 24. Expect a mainly clear sky on Friday with a temperature of 24 degrees once again. Now, a nice weekend is shaping up so far. Expect sunshine and 23 degrees on Saturday, sunny and up to 27 degrees on Sunday. Look at how next week is shaping up right now. Expect sunshine and 32 degrees on Monday, even warmer with a high near 33 degrees on Tuesday. Now, the average high for this time of year is 24 degrees with an average low of 10. The record high was set back in 1996 at 33 degrees, and the record low was a cool 2 degrees back in 1979. The sun rose at 5:30 and will set at 9:41. Looking at Thursday's national forecast now, it should be mainly sunny on the west coast. Expect a high of 22 degrees in Vancouver and 21 degrees in Victoria. Here in Alberta, it'll be mostly cloudy in Edmonton with a high of 23, showers and 21 for Calgary. Still on the prairies, expect clouds and 23 in Regina, rainy at 24 in Saskatoon. Pretty much the same picture in Winnipeg. It should be overcast with rain and a high near 24. The humidity continues in the central part of the country on Thursday. Expect rain and 29 degrees in Toronto. Showers as well in Ottawa with a high of 29, and in Montreal it'll be overcast with a high near 30. In Atlantic Canada, it'll be partly cloudy in Fredericton with a high of 27. Clouds mixed with sunshine and a high of 28 in Halifax. Partly cloudy in Charlottetown with a high of 28. And in St. John's, expect clouds mixed with rain and a high of only 13 degrees on Thursday. As WestJet continues to recover from a crippling weekend strike by its mechanics, one of the leaders of the union's bargaining team says the job action took a toll on relations with the airline. Union Representative Ian Evershed says it's very unfortunate that some of the things said by both sides went as far as they did. The work stoppage also did a number on consumer goodwill, with travelers turning to social media to vent their frustration. The strike also sparked outrage in the C-suite, with WestJet CEO saying in his 25 years in aviation, he's never encountered such an unreasonable counterparty. Alexis von Hoensbroek said calling for a strike despite the federal labor minister ordering arbitration was a misuse of the right to strike. Canada's merchandise trade deficit widened to $1.9 billion in May. That compared with a deficit of $1.3 billion back in April. Stats Canada says exports in May dropped 2.6% to about $62 billion. That's the lowest level since July of last year. The agency says imports fell 1.6% to more than $64 billion as imports of motor vehicles and parts dropped around 4%. Health Canada has recalled more than 5,000 heat pumps sold in the country over risk of excessive heat exposure. Multiple models of Daikin, Amana, and Goodman branded heat pumps are included in the recall. It says power interruptions can lead to the units providing heat once power resumes, despite the thermostat being in cooling mode. Those with affected heat pumps are being told to stop using the product until the issue has been fixed. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 269 points on the day to finish at 22,223. The Dow was down 23 points to 39,308. The S&P 500 was up 28 to 5537, and the Nasdaq was up 159 points to finish at 18,188. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 85 cents to 83.66 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down a penny to 2.42 U.S. Gold was up 26.66 to 23.56 and 11 cents U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 97 cents to $30.50 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.95 per bushel, barley is at $5.92, canola is at $14.86, and corn is at $7.24 per bushel. Live cattle August contract was up 83 cents to $185.93. Also August contract was feeder cattle, which was up $2.28 to $263.38. Lean hogs were up 53 cents to $89.75. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.33 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced new funding for testing methane emissions reduction technologies. Environment and Protected Areas Minister Rebecca Schultz says $15 million will be spent over the next 5 years to test new technologies, reduce emissions, and create jobs. Government officials say the funding will help more Alberta companies test technologies free of charge in both laboratory and live settings, attract more investment to get technologies to market that much faster. There's an Alberta grassroots conservative group which says there should be a leadership review of our premiers every couple of years. Nadine Wellwood, co-founder of the 1905 Committee, will share details with us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, visit lethseniors.com/volunteer drivers. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There are always differing viewpoints when it comes to how our province should be run, where the focus should be. Is it healthcare, education, the economy? You know, sometimes there are groups which try to influence party policy one way or the other. A new group has been formed in Alberta which is trying to do just that. It is called the 1905 Committee. Joining us now to discuss this is Nadine Willwood. She's the co-founder of the 1905 Committee, and she joins us from beautiful Fort Macleod. Nadine, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Now, where did the name 1905 Committee originate?
Well, I think that number is not unfamiliar to a lot of people. 1905 is when Alberta became a province. And when we were trying to find an appropriate name, I kept emphasizing, you know, what if we could do it all over again? And then we kind of thought about, well, the beginning and where we're going. And 1905 Committee is what we came up with.
So tell us a bit about your background in provincial politics and explain why you felt the need to start up the 1905 Committee.
Absolutely. So my background provincially started actually from a federal perspective, and I had started doing some work with the People's Party of Canada in 2019-2021. And then when Daniel Smith was elected the leader of the UCP, I thought we would see some true grassroots changes there. And I decided to throw my hat in the ring, actually for the Livingston-Macleod riding. And I was disqualified, regrettably, by the executive at the UCP. I guess I have very strong opinions, and that's not always popular with party politics. I'm not, I guess, as easy to control as they would like. And from there, my background is a chartered investment manager, so I've been obviously following economics for at least 2 decades, and of course, politics drives a lot of the economy. And so when politics sort of arose as an opportunity for me to get involved, I took kind of my background and meshed that a little bit with what I have been learning over the last 6 years. And thus we looked at what was missing, truly missing in the space as far as true representation by the people. And 1905 was born.
So did party officials with the UCP explain why you weren't able to run for the party?
Yeah, I have a long letter of reasons. I think the big one, honestly, was just they felt I could not fit in with their team as far as the party goes. My opinions around, you know, things at the time. I have an aerospace and defense background. I have a lot of history and understanding as far as, you know, military industrial complex. And I had a slightly different view on Ukraine and how we should deal with that. They also didn't like the fact that, you know, I'm very much, I guess, one of those freedom fighters a little bit as far as COVID was concerned. And not so much a freedom fighter. I just wanted to see the protection of individual rights maintained in our province. And I can go on with a long list. I won't bore you, but those were some of the controversial issues that they didn't want to deal with.
So Nadine, what are some of your core goals with the organization 1905 Committee?
So some of the core goals, really, I'd say that if you had to pick one, it's about leadership accountability. A promise made needs to be a promise kept. And it doesn't matter who I speak with from any different political background, they all agree that if you're going to campaign and you're going to run an election, you need to follow through once you've been elected on those promises. And so one of the policies I probably would think our most popular policy that we are now currently pushing here in the next UCP PM is leadership accountability. So you have 24 months to fulfill your campaign promises, verbal or written, doesn't matter. You made a promise, you have 24 months to keep it. If not, you go back to a leadership review, and now you have to account to the people who elected you as to why you did not fulfill those promises. So if there's one area I think that everybody can agree on in this province is we need more accountability from our government.
Nadine, you just recently launched. What kind of interest has your group been generating so far?
We have generated quite a bit of buzz, actually. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors, people trying to figure out how we fit into the political spectrum, which is great for us because, of course, it's really gotten the word out there. People know we're here and we exist. So it's been a lot of fun, very exciting. But the reality is, we've got Edmonton's attention, and I think that's really what we've been trying to do. And we are attracting people from all different political spectrums and all different backgrounds. Obviously, we have a more of a conservative focus, but the principles, we are about principles and policy. And because we're about principles and policy, we really do appeal to a lot more people in a very unifying kind of way.
So how many members would you say you currently have? And are you receiving some good financial support so far?
We are getting lots of good financial support, small donations, some bigger donors as well. I wouldn't even begin to guess at this point. I've been so busy just really pushing the agenda, getting out to places like this. I haven't really focused on counting numbers. So we'll have to get back to you with that number.
Now, I'm curious to know, Nadine, are you getting a lot of people from the Take Back Alberta campaign, maybe switching over to yours?
It's been interesting. We've had a lot of opposition in some respects from the Take Back Alberta. There seems to be this thought that we are trying to get rid of Danielle Smith. And there are very much fans of Danielle Smith. And for us, it's not about the leader. It's not about the party. It truly is about accountability. But because some people do feel threatened, I think it's kind of, got people's attention in some respects. We've become a target for some individuals to come after on the Take Back Alberta side. And then there's other people who have been really disenfranchised with the fact that Take Back Alberta has become a little bit more a David Parker organization. It served this province so well in so many ways in re-engaging the citizens politically. But I think where it missed out was it needed a broader base and a better foundation. It was sort of formed around one concept: get rid of Jason Kenney. And for us, it's about leadership accountability, and we're really going to focus on principles and policies. And I think when people understand that, I think some of the fear and some of the threat will go away to some of these other organizations. And we are really something that they can actually be a part of as well. We're not looking to replace anybody. We're just looking to kind of be this bigger umbrella tent where there's a place and a home for everyone.
So what is your current view of our Premier, Danielle Smith?
I think Danielle Smith has done some things well, but I think there's been a lot of campaign promises that have been made that just haven't been kept. And I think there's been some, in my opinion, poor judgment decisions made. We did a Redford survey poll, and a lot of people didn't agree with the fact that she appointed Alison Redford to a Crown Corporation. Of all the people in this province, as far as even Conservatives, I think Alison Redford is one of the least liked. And I think that was a poor judgment decision on her part. She's promised tax reduction. She hasn't followed through on that. For me, it's about priority. If you're going to, talk about a high-speed train between Calgary and Edmonton before reducing taxes, as you have promised in your campaign, I think, again, that's a lack of judgment.
Let's talk about some of the campaign promises from our Premier, Danielle Smith. One of those being amending the Canada-Alberta Cooperation on Immigration. Alberta does need people, but you believe perhaps similar to Quebec, we should be a little more cautious about who comes to live here in Alberta?
Absolutely. Economically, you have to have the economy able to keep up with the number of people that are coming into the province. And we have migration, I think, issues as well. We have a lot of people moving to Alberta because Danielle has rolled out the welcome mat. And she's even commented that we need 10 million, or she expects to see 10 million people in the province in the next 20 years. Housing, economy, jobs, we just do not have the capacity for that. And so I think we need to take a very realistic approach with what realistically we can accomplish, what we can do. And again, Quebec is a very distinct society, but so is the West. Alberta has a very specific, distinct culture, history, and I think we risk losing that by allowing too many people into the country without proper measures to integrate them properly into our society.
Now, Nadine, you would like to see the UCP get the province back to a flat tax. Why do you feel that's so important? And how soon would you like to see that implemented?
Well, two reasons actually. We had an Alberta advantage for a long time, and it was one of the least expensive places to live. And business boomed here, entrepreneurs boomed, freedom really flourished. And I think if we could get back to that, and I think taxes is a huge part of it. Right now, Alberta is not an inexpensive place to live. We pay a lot in taxes. And I voted instead of just reducing taxes to go to a flat tax for two reasons. Not only does it keep more money in the pockets and the jeans of Albertans, but it also will help with political favors. If everybody is paying the exact same and everybody see one rule of law that applies to everybody equally, then it's very difficult for politicians to use tax dollars to gain political favor.
Now let's discuss leadership accountability for just a moment here. You believe the party brass should implement a mandatory leadership review 2 years after an election if campaign promises haven't been fulfilled. Who would really determine this?
I think if we put that into a policy at the UCP, at the NAGM, everybody votes on it, and we really push this through. Politicians honestly believe that they are held accountable once every 4 years at the polls. And the greatest amount of influence I think we as individuals have are at the AGMs and at the political party level. And so I think if we can, as a grassroots movement, we're supposed to be a grassroots organization, can push a policy like this, it holds politicians to account. The worst thing I think that can happen with a politician is they get too comfortable. And I think being a little uncomfortable and knowing there are people watching and now they are accountable for what they say and have to follow that through with appropriate action is the best way to return politics to a more grassroots, honest, open, transparent way of working.
You know, with a new job, there's a probationary period. Some companies have 3 months, 6 months. Maybe we should do the same thing for our politicians.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. You and I are accountable for the jobs that we do. We have to be doing a good job. We have to be accountable for what we say. And if not, we need to either be replaced or we need to say, okay, what do we need to do to improve? And so this is a great way, I think, for everyday citizens to provide feedback to their politicians.
Now, your website declares Constitutional Convention. Alberta resolves to initiate and promote constitutional reforms with other provinces, focusing on key priorities such as equalization, access to tidewater, and health transfer payments. How do you really envision this happening?
Well, I think everybody will agree that Alberta hasn't really gotten a fair deal with the federal government. And I don't think Ottawa is really ever going to sit down with us to discuss how we can get a truly fair deal. So I think the focus really needs to be speaking with much like what you're seeing with Saskatchewan now and Danielle Smith. They're kind of aligning, which is a more unified and a bigger camp, to take on some of the federal policies. Now, if we can bring BC into that conversation and Manitoba into that conversation, I think that's the way to go. So Alberta trying to do it on its own, Saskatchewan trying to do it on its own. I don't think we're going to get really anywhere with that. So I think what we really need to do is have the conversation with the provincial premiers and really come up with those policies and then push those policies forward as a united force. And so Constitutional Convention, I think, is the right way to do that. It hasn't really been effective even in the US, but we have to start somewhere. And I think it's a good place to start the conversation.
Naheed Nenshi, the former Calgary mayor, is now the new leader of the Alberta NDP, and the race wasn't even close. He took something like 67,000 votes, about 86% of the vote. How should the UCP respond now to this, seems like a very popular candidate and the new leader of the Alberta NDP?
Well, I think realistically, the UCP has to play its own game. We have our own policies, we have our own viewpoints, and I think we really need to continue to grow our base, but not trying to win over the left. I think realistically, what we need to do is be really strong, really accountable, be open, transparent. And I think that's what people are looking for. I honestly believe people are so done with politics. Why? Because they go, oh, that's just politics. That's politicians. This is what they do. And I think we can do it better and we need to do it better. And I think if we can honestly show people that politicians show that people, they're listening to what the people want, what people have to say, and get back to the proper role of government. And I think that's where a lot of people have gotten confused. There's a lot of benefits and a lot of political favors, but those are pet projects. Let's get back to basics, and let's be open and transparent. Danielle Smith promised when she was with the Wild Rose, smaller government, smaller spending. And what did she do? Bigger government, bigger spending. And I think people in Alberta would be happy to see a limited government that's restrained in its spending, keeping more dollars into the pockets of Albertans so that they can be the ones to grow the economy. Government's not productive. Businesses, individuals, that's where the productivity comes from. And as it's been pointed out so many times today, even the OECD, Canada is not a very good place to be right now as far as production goes. And I personally believe that's because government has just become too big and the budgets are just too large. And, the private sector through regulation has been beaten down, and we have to start removing those obstacles.
Nadine Wellwood is the co-founder of the 1905 Committee. Thanks so much for joining us today from beautiful Fort Macleod.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
When difficulties in life come our way, when we experience a loss, sometimes it sets us back and we just don't know how to process it and move forward again. We can sometimes just end up stuck. Today's guests join us from Indiana. Chuck Elliott is a pastor at Bethel Church in Evansville, and Ashley Elliott is a licensed counselor. Together they have authored the book, I Used to Be, How to Navigate Large and Small Losses in Life and Find Your Path Forward. Chuck and Ashley, it's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to this. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and why you decided to write I Used to Be?
Yeah, part of our story is we faced recurrent miscarriage in 2015, 16, and 17. We lost little ones, and through that process and understanding how we process loss differently. Maybe there were some things in our life that we weren't recognizing as grief and losses that needed to get processed. And through working through my job and the church and being with people during their losses, and Ashley as a professional counselor, we saw that there was something that we could speak into this process and help people to recognize it. And in our book, we do share about our story and different aspects of that, but it's really in an effort to coach people where they are and how it is that they fill in the blank for I used to be.
And the book isn't just about miscarriage or anything. It is about any sort of way that the person might fill in that blank. I used to be married or pregnant or employed, any sort of loss that the person has experienced. And so we give people permission to grieve those traditional losses due to like death, but then also those smaller issues. Sometimes they can compound. And we can even learn a lot about them, even if they haven't compounded, because then if we gain healthier coping skills and we build mental stability, then we are able to thrive whenever we have something that might be even a little bit bigger that happens down the road.
That's amazing that you write about job loss as a form of grief, because a lot of people are married to their jobs, and if they were laid off or they lost their job or the company went under, it can be a huge loss for them. Now, in times of grief, we want to hear God's comforting voice, but sometimes he just seems silent. How should we handle this, and what has your experience been?
For us, we definitely experienced some different things with our relationship with God through different losses. But with our very first loss, we were in the ER, our first miscarriage, and we turned on worship music and we said, Lord, we bring you to this moment. We're very sad, but we need your help. We want you in it. The second loss, we waited about a whole year to try again. And it was the same time of the year, actually, this season of the year, several years ago. It was 2015, 16, and 17. And so 2016, we just were hit with different emotions. I especially felt just so much more sad in a deep way that like, this is what's going to be the rest of my future. Like we may never have another child. And so the first time it happened, I thought maybe this, this does happen to a lot of people, but we just coped, and I felt distant from God. I tried. I mean, we were still doing ministry. We were praying. I was leading. I taught at a university for 11 years. And so I'm still going to work every day, mentoring students. And yet I just felt like I'm going through and trying to continue doing the things, but I just feel like God's very quiet or distant. And so one of the things that I prayed in my tearful moment is, Lord, like I haven't turned away from you in this. I'm not even like shaking my fist at you, but where are you? And so I went to scripture and I said, what have other people done? And I've always loved the story of Job. And what I see with Job, like we kind of get this like backseat view, like the enemy is trying to devour Job, and God is allowing it, which can be hard, was always hard for me as I went through the story. But I also saw that I want to be like Job. I didn't want to be like his wife who said, curse God and die. Like I want to be faithful. And I admired his faithfulness, that even whenever God wasn't jumping in and rescuing him, that he was faithful. And so I continued to see some of the words of David in the Psalms and some different people who struggled. And I thought, I want to be gritty. I want to be faithful, even though it's difficult. And in time, I began to feel more of God's presence. And I realized like, it might have been a little bit more me, that it wasn't God that had pulled away from me. I just felt like there was a block, a grief block, or something that kept me from feeling like I could connect with God like I had previously done so.
And we've seen many times when people go through a loss, ourselves included, our perspective on who God is might shift. And it might shift in an inappropriate way and an incorrect way. You might find him to be more loving and more true and more reliable, but you also might think that he's distant, doesn't care, and he's punishing you. But when we read the scriptures, it corrects us. So that's part of the beautiful thing about when you stay in God's word. You learn more about him, you learn about his character. And when you have something about you that's getting off track and it could maybe go in a negative way, his word brings you back to what's true.
Now, what are some common ways grief lies to us, and how can we recognize the lies and overcome them?
One of the biggest ones is grief lies and tells us that we're alone, that you're alone, that nobody's felt this before, even that you deserve this, that you've done something wrong because you should be punished. And that's why you're losing the person, the situation, the job, the relationship that you had. That's one of the big ones. It also tells us that nobody could understand, that there's no way that anybody could understand. Nobody wants to hear my pain. Because if I was to ask you, if somebody was going through a really hard time, could they talk to you about it? You would likely say yes. But many times we think that if we were to ask somebody else to be there for us and just to listen and just to be a shoulder to cry on, somebody to go out to dinner with, somebody to go on a walk with, somebody just to listen, we think that they'll say no. And that's another one of the lies that we really see people believing, and it causes them to isolate. And isolation is not the key to getting better.
Yeah. One of those lies is to isolate. They say, oh, isolation is going to be the ticket through this. And even for us, whenever we were going through our loss, I didn't physically isolate as much as I emotionally isolated. And as I've talked to others and worked with people through counseling, I see that people will often isolate either emotionally or physically as a way to cope. And so we encourage people. You can even grab a piece of paper, the notes section of your phone, and list what are my positive coping mechanisms, the things that are good and bring health and healing, and what are those negative coping mechanisms. And sometimes that is a wall that we put up. We isolate to protect ourselves from being hurt again. And so for that reason, I would put it oftentimes in the negative coping. Now the tricky part is all of the good things can have some negative sides, and all of the negatives can have some good side, because we do bad things even for good reasons. And so we help people look at the function and the dysfunction. What is that good in that bad thing? So if someone is isolating or they're telling themselves that no one cares, we can look at the good in that. We do that to protect ourselves.
And if you are feeling alone or feeling that no one's around or nobody cares, you use something called switch theory. And so can you unpack that for us and explain how it applies to navigating through grief?
Yeah.
Anytime we go through a hard time, we can feel a little bit different, we might find ourselves navigating toward what we call a negative space. So we start off relationships oftentimes in a positive space with positive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We feel good and we are joyful. And so then we act in a happy way or a kind way. But eventually we face some unmet expectations and we shift toward a negative space.
Yeah, and in that negative space, you have negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and none of us want to be there. But what do? Do you communicate when you're in one of these spaces about your unmet expectations, or do you stay silent? Do you stay silent in a positive space and just think, okay, I'm going to be able to get through this? It was an unmet expectation. But what we find in our counseling and coaching and even working with businesses is many times people have negative thoughts and feelings, but they go uncommunicated. And when they go uncommunicated for too long, that's when you have a higher likelihood that someone's going to leave, someone's going to check out emotionally, physically. Affairs happen, higher turnover in businesses.
Yeah, so there's an apathy that kind of breeds itself in this negative space. There's that isolation, like no one understands. Well, then we don't tell, and then we perpetuate that cycle. And so, one of the tools that we use in our work is we help people to begin to be familiar with their positive and their negative space. So, we have patterns, we have things that we might say over and over again. And so, if you learn, when I'm in a negative space, I tend to say, no one cares about me. We can go, oh, there's that thing, there's that pattern thought highlight I'm in a negative space. Now that can seem really simple. We're like, duh, I know I'm in a grouchy mood. But if we see it as a little bit more that we've been thrust into this space, we say, no. I want to fight for that positive space. I want to do something. I want to bring God into that negative space, which is something people struggle with. They oftentimes want to fix themselves up, get all prettied up, and then they bring God into their life. And so whenever we feel shameful, we may want to like leave God out of it until we've gotten our lives fixed. So we can bring God into it. Maybe it's getting into nature, doing something that helps us feel a little bit better. We get that front part of our brain activated again where we can think rationally, and then we can start to think about what are those positive thoughts? And we don't just mean like rainbows and butterflies, but a thought of like no one cares about me is maybe something in a negative space. And so in that positive space, we say, I know that they care about me, but we need to talk about this, right? So we're not trying to just say everything's great and I'm not going to deal with anything. But oftentimes that negative space tells us run away, cut the ties, make everything bad. And really, we want to help kind of pull toward this positive space where we say, let's set up an appointment to talk, or let's get in nature, or go to a worship service or something that will help us, focus on God and bring ourselves back toward that positive space.
That made me also think about when I work with men for sexual integrity coaching. Many times when they're in a negative space and they don't feel as hopeful is when they're more likely to do something they're not as proud of, whether that be looking at something inappropriate or be tempted to have an inappropriate conversation with someone when they're married or that area. When you have those uncommunicated negative space thoughts, they're more likely to come out in a symptom that is really going to damage your life. So we help people to get underneath those things and prevent those things.
Now, actually, as a licensed counselor, you've helped a lot of people deal with losses. Just before we got going on this interview, I was telling you how I lost my father in 2003 and then my mother in 2020. And both times as soon as I heard the news, I was extremely focused on what needed to get done. I got very task oriented. I worked with all the family on the funeral arrangements and just worked with everyone really well. And I was at a really peak productivity at that time. But then 4 months later, the reality set in that these people are gone. And that's when I went through my grief. So what can you do what advice do you have to support those who deal with this delayed reaction?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm so sorry for your losses, and I really appreciate you being willing to talk about it.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people who actually say that that's the worst part, that they get through the first couple of days, the first couple of weeks, and sometimes even the first few months. But there's often a time where it comes and it hits them. And so whoever faces the time, at whatever pace, it's okay. You can accept that as part of your journey. Like we don't always know when we're going to be hit with it, but when we do, that we give ourselves permission to try to work on it, to say, I am worth the investment to give myself space to process. If that means taking a day off work and meeting a counselor or taking a time out in nature to have some extra extended time with the Lord to process and heal, there is hope and healing that comes just from even giving ourselves space. So it doesn't even have to be as formal as we think that it might need to be. But again, it comes at different times for different people.
And I think allowing yourself, not just I think, I know that allowing yourself to feel it when you need to feel it. I write about this in the book a little bit. We live close to the hospital where we lost our little ones. And will sometimes go for a run in the mornings. And it was early one morning, and I was going for a run, and I was running around the hospital. And while I was doing that, I started to feel myself get emotional. And I knew that I had a choice. I had a choice of whether or not I'm going to allow myself to feel this in this moment, or I'm just going to stuff it down and keep running. And what I chose to do was I allowed myself to feel it. I started to tear up and I was still running. I started to cry a little bit more and I slowed down until I started sobbing. And I was just standing in front of the hospital and I was sobbing. And that's not the look that I was necessarily going for, but it's what I needed to do in that moment, to grieve and recognize that my life is different because we don't have these little ones that we expected to have. And I'm often reminded of that moment when I could be tempted to push through and ignore what it is that I'm feeling. And what if I communicated to God? What if I communicated and recognized that I was feeling something that felt off and I needed to talk about it, pray about it, talk to Ashley about it, talk to somebody else? And it feels weak to stop and do something like that, but I know that I was stronger and became stronger, and I'm stronger now because I allowed myself to do that. And I can have conversations like this with you today.
Chuck and Ashley Elliott are the authors of I Used to Be, How to Navigate Large and Small Losses in Life and Find Your Path Forward. Chuck and Ashley, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm Naveen Day on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.